Gent University and at the VIB, with some expertise in plant cell division, DNA damage signaling, and also plant regeneration, which is probably explaining why I'm part of the ELS3 panel, which is covering cellular, developmental, and regenerative biology. Yeah. So what I will explain you today is my experience as being a starting grant member of LS3. So it might be that some of the things that I tell might be specific to the panel and might be slightly differently handled by other panels. So I do not know that. Yeah. So first, some words on the composition of the panel. So I'm not 100% sure how I was selected to be part of the panel, but it's my guess that this is something that is, the invitation comes actually from the ERC Scientific Council. So it's my guess that members of that council make some suggestions for panel members. But what I do know is that you get this invitation to be part of this panel well in advance. Eh? So it's, I think, close to 1 year before the call actually opens, that you get invited to be part of a panel. And typically, once you're invited to be part of such a panel, you will serve 4 terms. But this is in a bi-yearly schedule. That means if I am panel member in 2018, I will not be panel member in 2019, but then again, I will be panel member in 2020. Which is something that might be of importance when you get an A score, because as you have heard before, if you will have a score, a B score, if you get a B score on your project, it will mean that you will be able to reapply. Sorry, I'm getting confused now. I'm not 100% sure. I think if you get an A score, but you didn't get a grant, you can reapply the next year, but that will be then evaluated by a different panel. Okay? So it will not be the same panel as the panel that gave you an A score. Now, this panel is varying in sizes according to the topic of the panel. Which I guess is related also to the number of applications towards a specific panel. But typically, I think it goes from 14 to 20 members. And these different members, they cover a wide area of expertises in the topic of that panel. Yeah? But very typically, at least that's my feeling, there's always about 2 members that will cover about the same topics. Yeah. So that means you will have at least 2 people that can make a similar judgment on the proposal. So first step in the process is defining or determining conflicts of interest. Okay? So conflict of interest means that I cannot evaluate any project of applicants, which is or was recently part of the same organization I belong to. Okay, so in my case, that is very broad. That means that any application within Ghent University or VIB, I will not see. Yeah? Likewise, if an applicant was a previous student or a postdoc, or even within a close collaboration, I will have to flag that, and I will not be involved in the evaluation of that candidate. Okay? And also, very logically, if an applicant is a family member, I will have to flag that, and I will not be part in that evaluation. Yeah? So that means if there's a conflict of interest, I will be excluded from the whole procedure. Okay? So I will not see the project of that applicant, not even the title of that project. I will not see the review reports, and I will for sure not be involved in any discussion on that applicant of that project. Okay? So the only thing I will know is that if such a person will be allowed to go to the second step of the evaluation, and in the end I will also know whether this applicant will have the grant, yes or no. So the second step is then the assignment of the projects to evaluate. So typically what has been done is that the abstracts are sent around to all the panel members. And then we are asked to flag those projects of interest. Yeah. And then finally, the chair of the panel will make the distribution of the different projects among the panel members. Okay? So that will typically hold those projects that I flagged of interest, but it might also hold still other projects that I did not flag personally, but of which the chair thinks that it might still suit my expertise. Yeah? So typically a panel member will review about 20 to 25 projects. And typically every project is assigned to at least 4 different panel members. Yeah. So I told you before that typically there will also be 2 panel members that are really in the field of your application. Yeah. But it also means that very likely there will also be 2 panel members assigned which are not directly involved in your field. Yeah, and this is very important to realize when you write your B1 proposal. Okay? So you should realize that at least 2 of the panel members likely need to have a good view on the background of your application. Okay? And you have to explain very well what it's about and what is the impact of what you will do. So once the projects have been assigned, we typically are given 2 months. And during these 2 months, naturally, we don't have any discussions on that application with the other panel members and naturally also not with any of the applicants. So at the end of the 2 months, we're asked actually to score the projects. So this is based purely on the B1 part. And we're asked to score the project by giving a score on 1 on 5 points, and also the applicant, which also will be a score 1 to 5 points. Okay. Now for the project, what has been taken into account is the groundbreaking nature and the potential impact of the project. Also, the question whether the proposal goes beyond what is already known. Okay? And does it really address an important topic? Okay? It's also taken into account is the high risk, high gain. Okay? So actually, typically what has been looked at is what is the value for money. Okay? So will there be the payoffs? Will that actually be worth the investments which the ERC will make into your proposal. Yeah. And also what is a criteria which is taken very seriously is also the feasibility. Okay? You can actually promise in a proposal to fly to the moon, but you will have to prove that you really have the tools to do so. Yeah. Concerning the applicants, what has been taken into account is the applicant. So I say here principal investigator, but this is wrong. It should be actually the applicant. You don't need to be a principal investigator to apply for these grants. But what has been taken into account is the ability to conduct any groundbreaking research, also the creativity of the person, and also do you have actually the expertise to actually do what you promise to do into the project. Things which are taking, well, at least perceived as being negative is lack of originality. Yeah? So a lack of focus. If it goes all directions, this is not a good indication for the project. Also, a lack of ambition, which is very frequently translated into what is the scale of the experiments that you're going to do. Yeah? And as also mentioned before, lack of feasibility. Okay? It should be clear that what you will promise to do, that it's within reach. Which is not been taken as negative criteria is any lack of mobility. Okay? I've seen already grants being appointed to persons that will execute the project at the same place where they got their PhD and as well the same place where they did their postdoc. Yeah. That's not to say that you should not have any mobility, because if you have mobility, that's of course seen as a positive criteria, because very frequently we notice that having mobility is also going together with gaining some complementary skills. Yeah. But it's also not taking as a negative criteria is the type of journals that you will publish into. So you don't need to have only Nature papers on your CV. Yeah? What's more important is the impact of the work. Okay? And like it was already highlighted in the previous talk, it's a very good strategy for any of the 5 publications that you put in your, that you want to highlight, that you explain very well the impact of that work. So try to explain to the panel why is it this a very important contribution to the field. Yeah. So things that are taken into account are career breaks. Okay? Did you take paternal leave for children, or maybe you had to take care of sick persons, and that then you should actually mention that explicitly in your documents. And there's also a possibility to describe any negative impacts that the COVID had on your career. So then the 4th step is that we actually meet together. So in Brussels, at least when there's no COVID restrictions, and we meet there over a period of 3 to 5 days. Yeah. So a few days before that meeting, we get all the review reports. So that means we get to see the reports of the other panel members, of course, except those of which I would have a conflict of interest. Yeah. And then when we meet in Brussels, we will discuss all the different applications. Okay? And that is in an order that is determined by the panel chair. Okay? But very typically, first, the projects are being discussed that probably don't need too much time for discussion. So that are typically those projects that have received very high scores by all the panel members that reviewed the project, or reversely, all the projects that received very low scores by all the panel members that reviewed that project. Yeah. I have the highest stress here. That is only the minority of the projects. So I think it's not more than 5 to 10% that will fall into this category. Yeah. So that means that all the others, all the other projects, so the 90% of the remaining projects, will all be discussed in detail. And so typically there's one reviewer which has been assigned as being the lead reviewer, which will first make a short summary of the project, so to refresh everybody's mind and also to introduce it to the panel members that were not involved in reading the project. And then subsequently, every of the panel members that has read the proposal will give their view on the project and on the candidates. So he or she will actually stress the strengths of that project, the importance of the project, or potential shortcomings of that project. Yeah. And then this project has been discussed by all the panel members in a discussion which typically takes about 15 minutes. And then the end objective is there to assign that project an A, a B, or a C score. Yeah. Sometimes, well, frequently this is quite obvious. Well, it's clear that whether a project should have an A or a B score. If it's not obvious, typically we put that project aside, yeah? And we will take it up again after we have discussed all the projects. Yeah. So Step 4 is then that we actually make the shortlist. So it was already discussed before that typically about 3 times the number of projects that will eventually be funded will be selected to go to the next round, so the second round. Okay, so that means if you go to the second round, your chances to have this project, this grant granted will go up to 33%. Yeah. So next then, for all these projects that have an A score, the panel will build a list of people that can be invited as external reviewers. Okay, so typically, the panel tries to come up with about 12 different names, again, taking potential conflicts of interest into account. And 12 is well, it sounds like a lot, but that is because from experience, it's known that eventually only something between 25 to 40% of the people that from the external people asked to review will actually agree to do that review. So eventually, the panel tries to have at least 4 external reviewers assigned for any of the projects. Okay. So last job that is done on that day is that the panel will also draft a short report for the projects that don't go to the next step. So that means these are then the panels that received either a B score or a C score. Yeah? And these reports are actually cross-read by all the different panel members that reviewed that project. Yeah? So after this step, the candidates are being informed. Okay? So they will get a mail, tell them that at an A score, which means that they will go to the next step, or whether they had a B score or a C score. And then actually it's the second round, which is much alike as the first round, with the difference that now every reviewer will be asked not only to look at the B1 part, but also at the more extensive B part, and also to look at the budget. Yeah, but the criteria are largely the same as in step 1. Okay? So that means, again, the major criteria will be, is this a timely project? Is it innovative? Does it go beyond what is already known at this place? And is it a high risk, high gain? Yeah. Like I mentioned before, typically, again, it will be reviewed by 4 panel members and minimum 4 external reviewers. Okay. And again, there's about 2 months to complete these reviews, during which period, again, there's no communication on this project between the different panel members and naturally also not the applicants. And then we come to the 6th step, which is the second panel meeting. Yeah. So again, 1 week before we meet, the different review reports are again shared among the different panel members. And then at that moment also the lead reviewer will be assigned. Yeah. And then we meet again in Brussels. So this time it will be again over a period of 3 to 5 days, during which the projects will be discussed in a random order. Yeah. And first thing that will be done is that the lead reviewer will again introduce the project to the other panel members. He or she will already give a short summary on the strength points, as well on the comments that has been raised by the different reviewers. And subsequently, the candidate is allowed to enter the review. So as was explained, this is remotely, so it will be through a video conference platform. And then typically the candidate is asked to give a presentation of 7 or 10 minutes. This is according to the rules that has been set by the panel chair. Yeah. And after that presentation, that is followed by 15 minutes of questioning. After that, then the applicant will leave again the meeting. And then there will be a general discussion among the panel members of typically 10 to 15 minutes, which then will result in assigning an A or a B score to that proposal. Yeah. Now, for the A scores, we also then have a look at the budgets to see whether the budget that has been requested, if it's fully justified. And then is the final step. That means we're going to draft the reports, which again are being cross-read by all the panel members that were involved in reviewing of that project. And then we actually make a ranking of the different proposals, which hold then, of course, the proposals that fall within the budget, which will have the A score, as well as proposals that have an A score but fall out of the budget. So that means that these are typically it's 2 different applicants that will end up on a reserve list, and that still might have the project approved if some extra budget might become available. Yeah. And then these rankings, they go to, again, the ERC Scientific Council, which then will give the final approval. And then finally, the applicants will be informed on the outcome, which, if I understood correctly, is typically something about 4 to 6 weeks after the panel has met in Brussels.